idea behind organizing such an event. For the AA, I think this is a very important moment because we are very much interested in what is happening in Asia generally. We have a very large contingent of students, of course, from all over the world, but specifically from Asia, who I think play an extremely important role in terms of the life and culture of the school. And historically, I know that many of the people who are presenting papers today and tomorrow are the alumni of the school and people who've really gone on to make a major contribution to the culture and projects and the architecture, urbanism, and landscape of the region. It is been the tradition of the school to actually also visit and make, for example, workshops, sometimes organized by Ken, but also by others in China, in Bali, in India, in other places, sometimes organized through AA Asia under the leadership of Mr. William Lim. And I think that it's been very important for us to be part and parcel of a group who actually visit different countries and learn from the practices that are happening in those places and bring some of that learning back into the teaching of the school, because I think while we are very much a London-based organization in one sense, I think it's very important for us to be always interacting and interchanging important ideas with people from different parts of the world, and certainly the significance of ideas and developments that have been happening in Asia. It's a very important part of our thinking and our pedagogy. And clearly the mechanisms and systems of production have been very significant. And I'm personally looking forward to learning a lot more in terms of what is happening. I think that Ken has managed to organize a fantastic and very diverse group of people, and I would like to ask him to tell us a little bit about the conference and the nature of the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good morning. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Mohsen for giving us this opportunity to present the work of Asian architects and artists and designers. It's a rare opportunity for them to come to London to show what they do, and otherwise, if we didn't have this forum, they would never have, many of them would not have the chance to do so. I think in that sense, I'm very grateful to the AA and to Mohsen in particular for this opportunity. As you know, we had a shoestring budget and zero budget, so most of this is done on a wing and a prayer and goodwill. And so I'm very grateful for all the participants for coming at their own bet. And so in that sense, it is as much, I'm as much grateful to them as I am to the AA. We've selected people who like to come and show their work. And for those of you who are students here or members of the AA, many of the participants themselves are ex-AA alumni. We have people from Japan who are AA alumni, people from Korea, people from Thailand, people from Malaysia. And so in some ways, some of them will be showing, I think, the work they did at AA and the work they're doing now. So you can see progression or diversion or divergence from what they did then and now, or whether there's any convergence. Now, today we have people from Singapore, Malaysia, Korea, and Australia and Thailand. The group from Taiwan fortunately couldn't make it because they said they just had the elections. There's a recounting of votes. Things are very tense in Thailand and in Taiwan, and so they are unable to come. And then we had a real bugger up with mainland China over the funding for the travel. In the last minute, he was not informed of his funding until Friday, by which time he had made arrangements for some other appointments. And so Mr. Chang Yang-ho said he couldn't make it. And so we will miss Taiwan and China today, but we'll still have a bit of China. We'll have Hong Kong, China, who are representing tomorrow. In which case, with these two participants gone, the firm will be moved up and will be at 4:45 today instead of a 6:15. And so now, let me go on to the first group. The first group presenting will be from Singapore, Mr. Geoff Malone, who will be showing a film, a video film called Horizon Scanners, and it will be about Singapore architecture and art in the new millennium. Geoff, is he here? All right, Geoff will say a few words about his presentation, and we'll be on.
Thanks, Ken. This is what we're showing today is in the form of a documentary. We've interviewed 17 people, which were basically selected from a group from AA Asia. To link it all together, we've done it in the form of a road movie. And it's basically trying to give a bit of a potpourri understanding of what's actually happening in Singapore. In the last couple of years, for example, censorship has, a lot of that's lifted, so it's opened it up to a whole new series of artists, filmmakers, not so much architects, but there's a lot of interesting developments happening in the arts, particularly with theatre. And it's very interesting in that case that for the theatre awards this year, most of the nominees are women, with the exception of Justin Hill, who'll be as an architect and part of this program, and he's up for a set designing award. So in a way, the arts are rapidly changing. Film, there's a lot of films coming out. There's one particular one that doesn't feature here. It's called Zombie Dogs. Zombie Dogs basically refers to Singaporeans. This is done by a guy, again, a no-budget film, and it just voices all his frustrations at the government and everything else about Singapore. With architecture itself, I mean, with theatre, with the other arts, you can basically do it without budget. Architecture, if you want it built, requires budgets. And I think with architecture, it's not going in the same experimental directions as the other forms of the arts. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. But I think basically Singapore, in that respect, is still a very conservative country, and it's still got a long way to go. Anyway, I'll leave the rest to what you see on the screen. Thank you.
Singapore is a city in search of an identity, an Asian city with a Western outlook. Her buildings are modern, technologically advanced, yet interspersed with ubiquitous shophouse, a quintessential Asian-built form, informal, vernacular, yet functional in every way. The city is at a crossroad. Much of its colonial heritage is still evident in the gridiron patterned streets and formal architecture, while local architecture in the form of Chinese temples, mosques and other religious buildings with their associated rituals and festivals continue to make their presence felt in an increasingly changing and complex landscape. The city seems to embrace traditional Confucianist values that purport to underpin the actions of the government and the education of the young. At the same time, the aspirations of its people are clearly materialistic and decidedly acquisitive. The city embraces free market practices in its conduct of business, trying in also many ways to find its niche in the global arena, but is not yet free of the command and control approaches in government actions that tend to inflict regulatory influences in almost all spheres of life. The city has no definite new culture, a continuing, evolving mix of the old and the new, both in its manifested built form and in their implied values and hidden meanings. How are the arts and architecture affected by this dichotomous and often contradicting intersection of values and their manifestations? How are their practitioners responding to these seemingly confusing and evolving cultural and social contexts in their artistic endeavours and aspirations. In this series of interviews with the Horizon Scanners of Singapore, we talk to the architects and artists of the land who look on the immediate and distant horizons of Singapore as they come to terms with its past and confront the increasingly complex challenges of a changing, globalising society. On our way to pick up Chua Beng Huat. He's a sociologist and he's going to join us to tell us more about Singapore and the future of Singapore's architecture, its skyline and the arts. Hi, Chua Beng Huat. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Tell us about your involvement with Singapore and the future of its architecture and the community and what contribution you've made to that.
I'm a sociologist at the University of Singapore. And in the past I had been the Director of Research of the Public Housing Authority.
Right.
And subsequently I've been working with different planners in planning different parts of Singapore, including in being involved in the major review of the concept plan of the entire nation or island nation in 2001.
So how do you reconcile the history and the culture of Singapore?
I think that basically we've gone through extremely rapid changes in both of the economy and therefore also of the environment. And in the early years there's been almost what may be called a scorched earth policy. Everything was kind of in the path of the bulldozers were basically mowed down. But as of somewhere around middle 80s, we begin to realize that there was something of a mistake, and therefore a fairly sort of concerted effort of conserving what remains as the architectural heritage was kept. I think the most interesting part of that was the fact that Chinatown, which is the most densely populated area in the country in the early 1960s, was surprisingly left intact, largely because of its density, because it was so dense that the construction industry at that time and the housing industry at that time was not able to actually resettle their entire population. So as a consequence of that, the destruction actually took place and the redevelopment took place outside the city core. Well, the Singapore skyline along the sort of Clifford Pier, the waterfront, this is the south end of the island, which is the very beginning of the Singapore city in the early 1800s. The interesting thing is that whenever you drive past this strip, the buildings always look so permanent, like now.
Yeah.
But in fact, since the 1820s, the entire strip changed over every 40 years because of the very rapid increase in land values, and so the intensification of use. Every 40 years, the whole facade would change. So prior to what is there right now in the 1920s and 30s, there was a whole stretch of sort of neoclassical buildings, and they look absolutely solid. But within about 5-year period, since 1960 onwards, they were all demolished. And so some of these houses, some of these office buildings, corporate buildings now, have been in place since the early 70s. So if history repeats itself, they'll probably start to be demolished very soon.
On the skyline here to the Esplanade Arts Centre, I know that you had quite a lot of involvement in the planning stages and the acceptance of the designs and putting together of this as a concept. Tell us what issues you were facing here.
Well, I've always been quite involved with people in the theatre groups, particularly local theatre. And when the Esplanade was suggested, the local theatre groups were quite upset in a way, because it costs a huge amount of money, about $800 million, and they were concerned that the money will all dry up and funding for the local theatre will actually be in trouble. So, but the original plans actually had planned for several smaller stages, which are kind of more conducive to Southeast Asian theatre tradition. But as the cost escalated, the government decided to remove those, which meant that all the original intentions of incorporating Southeast Asian artistic practices, theatre practices, are now not realized at all. I mean,
Okay, I think that's about it. So we're moving on now to Chinatown in Singapore. Okay, so we're here with Melvin Lim and Little, graphic designers from F Furious. Tell me, guys, what have you been working on since you graduated here in Singapore and came together 3 years ago?
We've done print work, web work, TV work, to decorating buildings, photo exhibitions.
So tell us about some recent exhibitions you've been doing.
There's an upcoming one at Page 1 Kinokuniya, the bookshop. It's basically for the Lomo World League competition. So it's a Russian compact auto camera, which has garnered a cult following in, let's say, Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore.
Yeah. So a lot of times we've also used Lomo in book covers, and magazine covers, and CD work, online work that we do as well.
Okay, tell us something about some of these other things. I mean, you've got actually a very diverse range here.
We try to do things differently here. With every project, we tend to look at what the project means, what kind of audience would pick up on it, and most of all, try to reflect the work by the design itself, and not just cut and paste a certain design style onto this project.
So what are the biggest limitations to creativity here in Singapore?
I would think it's censorship, because there are a lot of times when if you're going to paste a new picture that it's not going to be accepted. You want to portray a certain lifestyle that it's not going to be publicized at all. So censorship would be the biggest issue.
So what's on the horizon for you guys?
I guess there's more self-initiated efforts to start your own project in Singapore, and there are a lot more collaboration with people overseas. There are like artists and designers coming to Singapore to see the scene, and I mean we are more well-traveled now, so we go overseas, we see different arts and cultures and design, so we get influenced by them and we collaborate more. So hopefully this whole collaboration that's happening everywhere would lead to
A bigger awareness about
about design, how design can improve everyday life.
Away from Chinatown now and on into the city. Boon Gee, architect from the Look Architect practice, which is your own practice. We're sitting here with the backdrop of the mosque. It has something to do with one of your earlier projects, wasn't it?
That's right. We did a new extension right next to the very historic mosque here. And the idea is very much to do with contextual fit. And that project is hallmark of our work.
Okay, so you've moved on since then. That was what, 10 years ago? More
Yes.
than 10 years ago.
Yes, you can say that.
You've
Yeah.
moved on since then, and you've been doing a mixture of projects.
Yeah,
What's your latest work been?
We are currently involved in a wide variety of projects, from small residential right up to high-rise condominium, and some institutional and commercial works. For example, the library project that we are currently working on. We have a good understanding of the local culture, how the library cater to the locals, the custom and the way of living. Incidentally, that project is sit right in among all the HDB housing estate. So it's very much a community project, a community library that cater to the local.
What do you think the future holds for Singapore when it comes to young up-and-coming architects and the skyline of the city, for example? Where's all that going?
Well, the way I look at the future, I still have a tinge of optimism that if the field is slightly open up for us. It was a lot more difficult then when I started practice about a decade ago. Now I can see there are opportunity given to the local practitioner like myself hopefully in the future there will be more opportunity to open up to some of the smaller practices like ourselves.
Okay, back on the road again, off to see another architect on our magical mystery tour of Singapore and its sites and monuments. Okay, I'm here with Tan Guan Bi, and he's an architect, sometimes controversial, sometimes outrageous on the Singapore scene. He's known for designing and working on some quite prominent projects in Singapore. Tell us about some of the projects that you've been working on recently, Guan Bi.
Actually, currently I'm working on some really interesting projects in Hong Kong now.
Uh-huh.
So, not really in Singapore, really outside Singapore, Hong Kong and China.
Right.
Yeah. And this is most challenging because it's a new environment, away from known factors. Yeah.
You're choosing to work in China because they're more open to ideas, or is there another reason?
Actually, I'm out of this country out of no choice because it's getting very downhill anyway. What has been done has been done.
You're also an artist as well, which I didn't mention earlier, but you're well known also for calligraphy and for some of your beautiful artwork.
Yeah.
Do you think that this extends across all artistic endeavour? I mean, is this a problem that plagues all artists here, that they have to go out and make their name in the big wide world before Singapore will
I
think
think
that
it
they're
happens
any good?
everywhere. Just look at Lord Foster. He has to leave the country he made good outside the country. His best buildings are outside the country anyway.
Your work often has a lot of colour in it, a lot of organic forms in it.
Yeah.
Would you say that where do you get your inspiration from all of this?
I think
is
it's
it rooted in Chinese culture, or is this
I
something
don't.
that comes from
I think it's
elsewhere?
purely my background, being born here. And it's color of my surroundings, and also it's a personal intuitiveness. So it's a very personal preference. The color is there, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not there. White, green, white, blue. I mean, nobody knows it, right?
So where do you see the future for you? As what is, if you could have one wish today for architecture and for your future, what would that wish be?
My wish to get more jobs. Right? And there's absolutely, every architect wants it, more opportunities, more areas we can actually express ourselves. This building, this career hotel is done with, together with Lim, another fellow architect of mine. So is what we really see is that we don't want this building to be seen from outside alone, but to be inside and then to look out. It's actually a two-way mirror. And that's what the hotel is about. You don't bring people in and then you soak them inside this building and you do not know where you are, what you are. We are not here to make an interior make-believe world. We want to be inside to see the outside. And from outside you can look in. It's kind of very transparent two-way mirror sort of thing. Yeah. And that is what you should be doing in any country. Anybody who works in China, we have to look at the Chinese environment and landscape.
Off now to find our next interviewee. Beatrice Charles, Singapore-born actress.
Yes.
Graduate of the Guildhall School of Music and Drama.
Yes, I lived in England for 7 years.
Great. Toy Factory Ensemble.
Artistic director.
Artistic director. And director of some of Singapore's most colourful stage productions.
Colourful is the tactful
The
euphemism for RA/outrageous productions. I mean, I think that Singaporeans want to watch a production that is so-called that's sexy. I mean, I admit, loudly and proudly that I love sexy stuff. I mean, I like sex in the shows that I do and in the movies that I watch. And I think actually that most people, like it too. But while we want to watch it, we don't really want to fund it. And
Yes, I think you actually have the distinction of having won the distinction of one of the only productions in Singapore that's actually had to withdraw all of its publicity due to public complaint. Isn't that right?
yeah, that was for Fireface. I had a picture of this of one of my actresses. Sort of, she was supposedly nude, but she was holding this watermelon, a sliced watermelon, to sort of, it was a nice euphemism for a vagina.
Right.
And I thought it was rather tasteful.
So does sex sell in Singapore?
First question is all publicity, good publicity? Not necessarily. I mean, sometimes it can kill your show. Some sort of negative publicity, if handled well, can be turned into an advantage, and it sort of titillates people. And the first play that I directed, which was Shopping and Fucking, and Shopping and Fucking was a major hit in Britain. I mean, people queued up around the corners. It was one of those plays where it was so famous to see a queue of people, outside waiting to go watch this play. And it wasn't sexy in that it was erotic, not at all. I mean, it was about the underbelly of London society. It had sort of pimps, drug pushers, rent boys. I mean, one of the most famous scenes in there was a rimming scene, the ass licking scene, and the last one, which was a gang rape. And I mean, those scenes were incredibly painful, and incredibly painful to direct as well, and to watch the actors go through it, and to try and put them through. I mean, there's some things that you can't really fake in terms of the psychology of it, and putting the actors through that was probably one of the most challenging things I've ever had to do. Yeah.
You've also directed and appeared in films like Stories About Love. You mentioned Fireface, and Bent is another one.
All had sexy boys in there.
All the same themes. Yeah. Moving on from what you've been doing to what you're currently doing, Beatrice, you're currently working on 2 plays, I understand, East Side Story and Realm of the Senses.
Yes.
Now, for any of us that have seen the Japanese original of the latter,
Soft porn.
I'm wondering how you persuaded the leading man to every night have a castration live on stage. I mean, obviously you're a very persuasive director. Tell us how you're tackling that.
Well, from the East, Realm of the Senses is going to be done in about 8 months from now, actually. I usually spend about 6 months to a year conceptualizing and sort of dreaming up, a production. I've convinced a lead actress already, but I can't say at this point in time I've convinced a lead actor yet. We're not going to be chopping off anybody's genitalia within the play, because after opening night there would just, there'd be no more play.
Ruin the whole surprise, yes.
I don't think the audience is really prepared to see a
live surgery.
Yeah, this sort of castrated penis rolling off the stage. On a serious note, I first heard about Realm of Senses. I mean, somebody actually told me the story, and just in this person telling me the story, I thought it was a hell of a story. And then I realized later on, doing more research and eventually watching the movie, that this was actually based on a real life story. When I watched the movie, much as the final scene of the movie was very, very shocking to see this, castrated penis bleeding all over the screen, but what was actually more intriguing about it eventually was the idea of sexual obsession and sexual imagination. And I know I'm horribly flippant about a lot of things that I talk about, but when you actually start working on a production, sex in itself doesn't sell a play. No. I mean, no, not really. I mean, strong the themes like, I think, sexual obsession, sexual imagination, these are themes which I feel has not been explored in Singapore theatre, or even in the Singapore screen.
We're wending our way up the hill here in the middle of Singapore's consular district with some very nice houses here to go and meet Joseph Lim in one of his more exotic designs, which is the tree house. We're here with Joseph Lim, who's an architect. He's also a lecturer in architecture and also does some interior design sometimes. But here we are sitting at the moment in one of your houses, which has been a rather unusual project, I would say, in architectural terms. Tell us about the tree house.
Well, it started off with this client who wanted to build something for his granddaughter, and she'd been reading all about tree houses in bedtime stories, and their grandfather decided to oblige. They have this huge tambusu tree in a large compound. It's a bungalow here in the Bukit Timah area, and so the grandfather decided to set about looking for a treehouse architect. And so happened there are very few in Singapore. I got wind of this project through my friend who recommended me to him. There are 3 levels here. The bottom part is like some kind of a deck where she could have a little tea party if she wanted to. But as you climb up to the first level, where we are in right now, it's actually darker, shadier, a place where you could hide behind the massive tree trunks, and you could squeeze in between the two trees actually. This house is built on 2 trees, a larger tambusu and a smaller jeering tree. The upper level has a totally different character. It's much more open, it's brighter, and it's seen like an observation post, where from the top part you could see right across to the Bukit Timah area.
Where are you going from here?
There were a few requests from some of the government organizations like the Singapore Science Centre and I think the Singapore Children's Home to consider similar structures in the landscape for children to play. I'm actually toying the idea of building an outdoor classroom where, oddly enough, I did think about flying fox and little ponds and vegetable patches. The ponds would be where the students would, the children could adopt their fishes.
We're now arriving at one of the rare oases in Singapore, the zoo. Okay, we're here at the zoo with Justin Hill, this is one of your projects, I think, Justin, but you're also a impresario.
Am I?
Director of one of the local theatre groups here.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us something about this project here at the zoo. Why are we here?
We were asked to join a shortlisted number of architects to come to be considered to do a new entrance for the Singapore Zoo. I think they wanted a really different approach to redesigning the facility here. They were reinventing themselves, their image, as not just a normal zoo. They wanted to be seen as being a sort of like a wildlife reserve. And they wanted, I believe, to really change the sort of style of their animal habitats as well, so they're much more interactive. And with that came the whole idea that they needed to pull down the old zoo entrance, which was just really a shed, and create a facility which was going to be big and combine the various functions which were already existing around the entrance area. So it was a very complicated site to work on. We decided very strongly to do a very contemporary, open and very functional entrance, and you can see it's completely open. And the other notion was to really try and put this building within the jungle sort of setting, you know, and in the fullness of time everything's going to grow, and I can see the water gardens really filling up now.
You're a committed supporter of theatre arts. Tell us about what you've been doing there.
In theatre I really enjoy it because it's like I'm given a brief by a young director, or I have to work with other people like lighting designers, costume designers. You know, it's a completely open book, you know, so I've always enjoyed that.
What about the future for the Singapore art scene, for design in terms of architecture, for the theatre, for arts in general?
In Singapore, it's just, you know, Singapore's a really young country. It's only like 40 years old since independence, and you can't actually expect a miracle to happen overnight, even if you've got a lot of money. And I think it's very healthy.
So from one jungle, back into the urban jungle. Dr. Waffles Wu. So, Dr. Wu, aesthetic surgeon, artist. What for you is the connection between art and cosmetics or aesthetic surgery?
Well, aesthetic surgery basically is a melding of 3 or 4 different disciplines. One, of course, is surgery. The other is a little bit of psychiatry, or treatment of the mind. And then you have that elusive artistic element, which is, I think, the most important part, because somebody can teach you the technical aspects of operating, but they can't teach you how to examine somebody's face. They can't teach you what operation that person needs to look aesthetically better, or in fact to have that or acquire that it factor, that X factor. What is difficult is how to put those very elusive qualities into words or into concrete gestures or into an operative procedure. So there is a lot of subjectivity. Of course, there has been some science that we've tried to apply to it. We've probably all heard of Stephen Marquardt in America, who's applied this 1.618 rule to the human face and feels that everything has a certain proportion. And if you follow this ratio of 1 is to 1.618, you'll get a perfect face.
You're also well known for your erotic, let's say, artwork. Tell us something about your inspirations for the work you do. Is it any connection with your work, your day job, as it were?
I'm not sure it is. I started this many years ago, maybe 25, almost 30 years ago, just drawing. It was started off as a dialogue between my grandfather, who painted in his spare time, and myself. And we used to just paint pictures for each other. And he would be more traditional, kind of a Chinese painter. And I adopted that same style of using Chinese ink and rice paper. But being educated in the West, I think my imagery was a mixture of both West and Western and Eastern. And I thought it was kind of funny and ironic that a lot of the Chinese painters who we revere in the Chinese art world were in fact either drunks or womanizers and having a good time when they were not painting mountains and durians and fruits and all these inanimate objects. So I thought I'd do a kind of a twist, and I paint the so-called erotic lives of people in a make-believe Chinese world. I have a little emperor, and I have his many concubines, and I paint day scenes where they're interacting, little jealousies between the women vying for the old man's affection. I do bring out a lot of the sexual, erotic element. I think it's healthy. I think it's part of life. I think it's part of what makes the world go round.
We're just coming up to number 1 Mulmeen. I'm here with Richard and Mansam from Architect's Office, Woha, and we're sitting here in the pool deck of one of their recent creations.
This is an apartment building. It used to be quite typical of Singapore, I guess, in that there used to be just one small house on the block, and now there are 50. And our idea for this building was really to create a more interesting urban object than just stacking up a whole lot of apartment designs. And some of the ideas for the facade were to create tropical facade using bay windows and a contemporary version of the monsoon window.
The future. You're working on projects at the moment in Bangkok and
in Bali, Phuket, and hopefully we'll probably do work in China as well.
But what's the big creative carrot that you're after at the moment?
I think what we do like is not to specialize, actually. And I think what has been very fortunate for us is that we started our own practice with doing houses. And for the first 4 to 5 years, we have been focusing on small houses. I mean, they are detached, standalone houses, but that has actually been quite good for us to experiment ideas. And I think we decided to move on and focus on other types of buildings, large jobs. And we have, in year 2000, sort of won a competition to build 2 MRT stations in Singapore. And now we have completed a church as well. And we have moved on to do commercial projects as well.
So we're leaving yet another of Singapore's high-rise apartment blocks, cities in the sky, and off to our next location.
Hello.
Okay, I'm here interviewing Jackson, who's a member of the Funk team, which is a design studio here in Singapore. What does Funk do? What does Funk stand for?
Funk is basically more like a design collective. Some of the design works has translated to commercial projects with clients.
You recently had an exhibition in New York, and there's some T-shirts that were from the punk exhibition, and these are some panels. Tell us something about what this was all about.
The name of the exhibition was called Control to Chaos. The exhibition was at the Lower East Side of in New York. What has happened was that we came out with a series of canvases that formed into a giant mural. It was based on the theme of the three levels of the world, based on the Chinese fairy tale or mythology, where you have heaven, earth, and hell. What has happened is that the line between fine arts and design and commission work has been blurred. In a way that nowadays a lot of works that we've done, even with commercial corporate brands or clients, are of our own personal styles. That means we have demonstrated that we could do things that are really that can talk to the audience, with our own style of work.
So you're off to Sydney. What's happening in Sydney that's going to be different from what happened in New York?
What will be different is that we will be given a talk in Sydney to talk more about what we have done for the last 10 years to an audience of around 2,000 to 3,000 people.
So what does the future hold then?
Well, we're hoping that one day we can expand on the brand itself to do more of the products and the kind of works that we want to do, and maybe to expand more to the people around us, to get to collaborate with more people who are like-minded like ourselves. We've done projects like previously we published a book called the Utopia Project, where we invited various creative talents from around the world, including Singapore, who are young and like-minded like ourselves, to work on the project together with us. So we do intend to expand it some more.
Now and see what else Singapore's architects have got in store for us. Okay, Chimbi, well, here's to your new home. Tell me about the house.
It's what we call in Singapore a semi-detached house, which means to say that it shares one wall, one boundary with the next one.
The layout's quite interesting, though, isn't it? Because it's not the normal sort of domestic layout for the rooms and things. Why how did you write that?
Partly because as an architect, and also as we conceive of it as a home for retirement. And the first thing she said to me, we must have the bedrooms on the first story. I was frankly a bit taken aback, but almost automatically had sort of wanted to put the living area on the first story and go upstairs for the other rooms. We need the bedrooms and so on. So I had to rethink it completely. And it made a lot of sense. By choosing this, unconventionally again, by choosing my site at the top of a T-junction, it means that with your living room on the second level, you have an elevated one-story height from the living room looking downwards.
In contrast to this, which is designed for your own private use and your family's use, you're also responsible for a number of major public buildings which now comprise part of Singapore's skyline.
Well,
tell us a bit about those.
The headquarters of the Public Utilities Board, the authority that supplies utilities to the whole country. Well, that was finished in 1978. I did a couple of hotels in Singapore. One is at the Sheraton Towers in Scotts Road. The other one is the Holiday Inn at Carpage Road.
What's about this?
Well, these, first of all, I must say that these are not particularly very exemplary works, but it is the result of 3 years study at the Nanyang Academy of Fine Arts, which I started in 1990.
On the move and off to our next interview. Hi, Kelvin.
Hi.
So, filmmaker, writer, director, journalist. Have I left anything off the list?
I think that about covers it. I think it pretty much sums up the kind of hybrid creature you have to be in order to survive in the arts in Singapore.
Okay, and here we are in Singapore, sat in the middle of a Japanese cemetery. Why are we here?
I think we're here because it's a very unique kind of location that you can only find in a cramped up place like Singapore. It's the dead people living right next to the living. It's got a little bit of something to do with a project I'm working on. It's historical, it's about the Japanese occupation, it's about this part of our history that is rarely discussed, and it is a frightening time. And I think part of what I try to do is to just go a little bit back in our culture and history, scratch the surface and see if you find anything that makes people scream in a cinema.
Why is it that you're departing from the usual genre of sex and drugs and rock and roll?
I think I'm trying to look a little bit further, and I mean, it's common wisdom that the Singaporean market, it's very, very limited in size. And so what we're trying to do this time around is cast our eyes further and look at regional markets.
And the horror genre, what's topical about that at the moment?
Well, you just need to go The Ring to any audience in Shanghai, KL, Jakarta, Dubai. You just say The Ring, they get it, because Japanese horror is really frightening.
You started off with a short film here, which was Movable Feast,
yes,
which had the distinction of being described as being not great for its filmmaking qualities, but very good for its production achievements.
But what we wanted to do was to just celebrate the kind of like banal madness that we Singaporeans attach to food.
You then moved on to do Eating Air, which won you a lot of critical acclaim, actually.
You know, you always watched stuff coming out of Hong Kong, Japan. You know, in Singapore we get all kinds of films, and there's this fantastic romanticism. You know, it's like the gangsters of Hong Kong, you know, the Yakuza of Tokyo, and those aching teenage love stories, it always seemed to belong to somebody else. Whereas, what happens to Singaporeans? We're kind of too hot, we're kind of too packed together, we're kind of not rich, not poor, not happy, not sad. I think that mediocrity is fake, and I think what we tried to do in Eating Air was actually to grab back, to seize back some of the romanticism which should be ours.
Back on the road again and off to our next location. Okay, Geoff Malone, architect, filmmaker, chairman and founder of the Singapore International Film Festival. What are we doing sitting here?
Well, this is an environment we've been experimenting with for a new science fiction film I'm working on, which basically involves nanotechnology and Singapore mythology. And we're doing some pre-production work and shooting on it at the moment, particularly with CGI work, because with nano, we don't know what it looks like until we start experimenting.
Cinema and filmmaking and architecture, they're rather strange sort of bedfellows. Why have you gotten into these sort of dual roles, or how did you get into these dual roles?
Well, it started at university when we were studying architecture. In our last 2 years, we were doing an architecture review. As a result of that, we started making films, and after we graduated, there was a little group of us that continued doing it. And amongst them was Peter Weir, Phil Noyce, people like that. And once it's in the blood, it's very hard to get away from it. So when I moved to Singapore, you know, we didn't have a film festival. I said, why not? And we went into that. Also, as part of that, my architectural work, I designed multiplex cinemas. So this whole film thing seems to tie in together pretty well.
And so on the architecture side, what are you working on right now?
Well, we're doing a number of projects, nothing like you see here, but we're doing an experimental house in Castle Crag. It's called a soft shell, hard shell house. The hard shell part of it is sort of thin film photovoltaics, which are basically to generate electricity. The soft shell comes from the part of the house that can extend outwards on hydraulics. And Sydney having a winter and summer climate, in the summer it'll be extended out so the wind can pass through and that. But as it gets colder and as winter approaches, it can retract within itself and virtually form a little protected shell. Apart from that, we're doing a winery project in Melbourne, which is a little bit unusual. We're working in Brunei doing a nautical museum. We've just completed a project for the Salvation Army, which is, again, slightly organic in form. Sort of organic shapes, and that have always been an interest of mine, and particularly with nanotechnology and the future of that. I mean, this will virtually change the way we look at architecture. The development of all this work sort of all intertwines, and the idea of making the film is to also project ideas on architecture that I have. I mean, all you have to do is look at a film like Blade Runner and the impact that's made, not only as a film, but it's in books on planning like Utopia by William Mitchell, other books like Cyber City, so it's something like a thriller genre, which is what I'm doing. It makes it very accessible to the public to accept some ideas that would be normally hard to put across otherwise.
We're just coming up to a new, sleek, high-rise. Okay, Su Chian, architect. We're sitting here actually in one of your most recent projects, is the Lincoln Modern.
Right.
Interesting spaces. Tell us something about what was the inspiration behind this.
I think it was the concept came about on how to exploit the difficulties of the site. We have an island site surrounded by a lot of buildings. There's no great views, and it's a very skinny site. So we wanted to come up with a concept that would push the limit a little bit.
So moving on from this project to another project, isn't it, the Columbarium?
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about this very exciting project.
Yeah, it is in Guangzhou. When I first visited the site, I was taken by the beauty of the valley. I walked up a trail, and it occurred to me that I wouldn't want to put a huge building or a condominium from the dead. I traced the path that I climbed up and realized that perhaps it could be an experience, a procession to the top, to the prayer hall. And together with the feng shui master, which I was required to work with. If you look at the plan from the top, on one of the plans, it is in the shape of a dragon. And the dragon hugs the mountain and embraces the lake.
One of your other projects is a remarkable use of an old shop house, a very, very narrow space in Malacca.
When we first went to Malacca, we realized that there are so many of these empty lots, and to restore them would be very expensive. And this one in particular has very good ornamentation that has been in decay. So when we walked in, I was taken by the beauty of the existing patina and texture. So we came with the idea of actually 4 boxes. 4 boxes of different proportions and different materials. The first one is a living box, which is on the second story in the front. Then we have a sleeping box. And then the meditation box, which is the spiritual center of the place. And in the back, the machine box, which has the kitchen and the baths. Right?
And talking about your project you've got here in New York.
The seasons it was the premise that I started with. I'll be using it with the family more in the summer, for example. And we need space in the summer. We can open out in the summer, the kids can camp out, so to speak, screen out. In the winter, when nobody's there or less people are there, we want to retract the box.
Okay, we're leaving now the Lincoln Modern and off to see one of the other future shapers of Singapore. Dicks and drugs and prostitution. Is there anything you won't do to upset the senses in Singapore?
No, I don't think I'm trying to upset the senses, but I'm just trying to maintain the integrity of my film, basically, just like any other filmmaker would do to protect their film and the subjects that I'm dealing with. So, it's a very natural reaction to defend your work and have a big bang in the office of the developed senses. Yes.
What's your next project you're working on?
Well, I'm actually working on a new film. In fact, I just finished a new film about dedicated to the Bob Sensors for their commitment to protect Singaporeans from the harms of the arts, from the danger of the arts. So I made this new short film to dedicate to the Bob Sensors. It's called Cut, and which I hope that it will premiere in the Singapore International Film Festival. I'm in the midst of writing my second film. It's called 4:30 a.m. And right now, yeah, getting things ready. Yeah.
And are you collaborating with anyone on that project?
Well, I think right now it's still in the scripting process. We're thinking of working with investors from Europe and maybe some investors from Singapore, hopefully with the Singapore Film Commission.
So you've worked a lot with other local filmmakers, Eric Koo and others.
Yeah.
Are you now ready to make the big break and go and work with people in Hong Kong or overseas? Is that on the cards, Royce?
Not really. I think personally for me, I still want to work with local people. A lot of time people felt they have this misconception that Singaporeans have no talents, no artistic talents and things like that. And I think hopefully through my project, it can be an opportunity for them to actually, show to the rest of the world that we do have something here. For talents that appear in my films, I especially actors, I like to discover new talents.
Do you see yourself making films with locations outside of Singapore?
Personally for me, I still want to explore many stories within Singapore. I think there are many exciting things, many untold stories yet to unfold here. So I want to capture all this thing before all the wonderful buildings in Singapore have been destroyed. Personally for me, when I see Chinatown, I'm very distressed because of what the whole entire place had. I don't know, like, just look at Chinatown now, like it has lost its flavor. And I think we're trying so hard a lot of time to try to develop something for the tourists, and the tourist doesn't really appreciate what you're doing because they know that you're all out there to con their money, that kind of thing. You try to create Chinatown to make it more Chinatown than what it really has been. So you have lost all traces of the initial spirit of the place, the original flavor. Well, personally, I stayed in a kampong before. I was the last generation to experience the kampong life, and I really enjoyed the kampong stay because number one, I think you're not so isolated. When you stay in the HDB environment, you're trapped within your own cubicles. There's very little interaction. You just close the doors, and that's what happened. That's what's happening now. It's like people have problems trying to communicate to other people, trying to relate to people. So personally, I'm staying in the HDB environment, and I'm staying there because I have no choice. If I have given a choice, I would want to stay in a house where my feet can touch the grass.
So from here in the heart of Singapore, we're off now on another interview. Yeang, director, fundamental multidisciplinary group that you work with. Tell us something about what this group does and what you're doing in theatre now.
Okay, basically I've been involved in theatre for almost 5 years before I set up Fundamental. So basically the whole concept of fundamental multidisciplinary is because it all started because I don't really am, how should I put it, very comfortable with the idea of, for example, drama, because my background training is actually visual arts. So basically when I deal with theatre, I deal with it in a more visual and fragmented sense. For example, when I deal with drama itself, it's not about storytelling. It's about bringing an issue. The initial years when I first started doing theatre, a lot of people refer me as an angry artist. One main reason is because my work actually started with unhappiness or anger, basically things that I'm not happy with, or it can be politics, it can be social issues, things like that I'm not really happy about. So I'll actually conceive a play to actually talk about things like that. From as early as my interest with revolution, the idea of revolution, the idea of the energy of rebellion and stuff, to later into consumerism, and then into riots and all that. The first full-length play that I directed in '97, got into kind of some kind of trouble. But actually, it has opened up quite a bit in recent years. The interesting thing is, as long as you don't call names, basically you can get through with a lot of things. Yeah.
So what's your latest project about?
Latest project I'll be doing Actually, I have 2 projects, but due to funding, one of it I might not be doing. But I might do one project that actually I did in 99. It's called Date Me, based on we call teenage suicide. But at the same time, I put this character called Lieutenant Adnan. He's a Malay lieutenant army lieutenant in the Second World War, which I compares the life of these 2 persons. Probably the age gap is about the same. It's not very far, but one knows what he's dying for, while the other one, is playing with death or teenage suicide, as to speak. Yeah. And at the same time, I'm also talking about because there's too much glorification about Chinese war heroes, in which the real hero here, we're talking about Lieutenant Adnan, is the person who really fought for Singapore, which is something that I want to talk about as well.
We're here to meet Tay Keng Soon. Keng Soon, architect Tenggara. You've got a reputation as a rather outspoken critic of many of the projects which have actually come to fruition here in Singapore, but we're sitting outside one of your own projects here, which is the KK Women and Children's Hospital in Singapore.
Yeah.
Tell us something about the trials and the traumas that you went through to actually...
Yeah, well, this is the result of a competition, actually on a different site across the road.
Right.
And after we won the competition, I've never done a hospital in my life, what we won. And then they changed the site, and then also decided to change the architects. Yeah, and wanted to do the job themselves. So I complained to the minister, and he felt that it was rather immoral and unjust, and he intervened. And he could only get me back 1/3 of the job, so I did the design and PW did all the rest.
You worked some while ago on a plan for one of the local urban environments, and that turned into something of a larger project, which again turned out to be quite contentious, didn't it? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, you're referring to the Kampong Bugis development guide plan. The intention was to simply ask private architects to work on kind of local area plan. But we went beyond that, of course, and we decided that we couldn't really deal with the local area plan without understanding or without commenting or contributing to the larger picture. So we ended up designing the whole island. And that, of course, got everybody's chagrin up. And but I think we clarified a few very critical points, that densities in the downtown area should be a lot higher than it's presently, and that we should stop building all the new towns, because we are destroying the greenfield sites, we are removing the biodiversity unnecessarily, we are creating a huge transportation imbalance. The trains come in to the city during the peak hours full, but they go out empty to pick up the next lot.
You've mentioned your writing.
Yeah.
Again, it's not innocuous little works of fiction, is it? It's quite hard-hitting stuff. You describe it yourself as incendiary, I believe.
Yeah. I've just written a little poem which I think I will try and recall.
Please do.
I was out in the coast of Burma looking at a site for a possible resort, beautiful site. And we were in a boat, and lo and behold, there was a butterfly heading straight out to sea. So the poem is called Butterfly. And it goes like this. A butterfly flew out to sea in search of wonder, and maybe just to die. The Lion City, meaning Singapore, is certainly no place to fly, right? But painted wings make beautiful shrouds for those who fear.
That concludes our interviews with some of the horizon scanners of Singapore, those on the cutting edge of the arts and architecture in the Lion City. So, goodbye and thanks for all the fish.
Thanks very much. Would you like to take some questions, Geoff?
Just one thing. This is a very rough cut. What footage is put together and
Great. Any questions for Geoff? Well, no, I should add that there were a number of AA alumni there. Ong Chin Bee, I think, who graduated, I think, in 1964, I think. And what's another one? I can't remember. Anyway, good. So we go on to the next event, which is by Bernice, called Wayang Kulit. Wayang Kulit is, well, she explained what Wayang Kulit is. Bernice is an actress, a writer, and a filmmaker, and a dancer, I think. Could we have the Wayang Kulit? Oh, Bernice, there you are. Yes.
I'm not a dancer, by the way. Right. Okay. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here among such company, and that it is indeed an honor. Selamat pagi, as we would say in Malaysia. As the theme of the Malaysian work is centered on the Wayang Kulit, let me start off by talking a little about it. My presentation will be divided into three parts. I will speak very briefly about it, show you a selection of images, and then end with a 10-minute excerpt from a documentary that I did. My work as a writer, actor, photographer, and filmmaker has led to many interesting and varied experiences within Malaysia. My interest in personal stories, not excluding my own, has led me to work with people such as sex workers, indigenous peoples, women in prison, people with AIDS, and most recently, traditional masters of Malaysia, in an attempt to record and retell personal stories in a larger, more accessible context. Southeast Asia has only very recently been seen by anthropologists as a hub of theatrical activity, as it has been largely overshadowed by the largesse of Indian, Chinese, and Japanese forms. Given its geographical area and size of its population, the region of Southeast Asia is seen to contain the world's greatest concentration of theatrical activity, impressive in both variety and intensity. There are almost 200 individual forms of traditional theater in this region. They include puppet theater, dance theater, opera, religious performances, and proto-theater, or theater developed out of recitation of or singing of epics and poetic verses. These forms, although not as old as that encountered in the major Asian or Western cultures, certainly has a long history behind it. Much of it, unfortunately, unrecorded or lost. Recent decades have begun to see Southeast Asian traditional theater coming to its own, to be researched, documented, and even made into models for important trends in the West. Traditional theater in Malaysia is anthropologically contingent of a wide spectrum of styles and genres, due to the spiritual aesthetics displayed by the influence of animism, Islam, and Hinduism. These three belief systems have shaped Malay culture and are intrinsic in all art forms. The specific origins of the Wayang Kulit, however, remain vague. The form seems to have been around the Southeast Asian region since the 13th century, but again, there are no real records of where its origins are from. Written or epigraphic records are non-existent, but the oral tradition of the form provides some interesting and vague speculation. The Wayang Kulit is regarded as one of the most important of the many artistic and cultural forms of the Malays, the predominant race in Malaysia. But ironically, more than 80% of the Malay population have never seen a live, authentic Wayang Kulit performance. The decline of this form is due to many complex factors. The process of modernization and the increasing spread of fundamental Islam in the east coast of Peninsular Malaysia are primary reasons. In the 70s, there were more than 100 tok dalangs or puppet masters. Today, there are less than 10 left. But with the results of the recent elections, which have ruled in favor of a more progressive brand of Islam, there is hope, and the tides will turn in the continued process of traditional theater and a revitalization of these arts. The states of Kelantan and Terengganu on the eastern coast of Peninsular Malaysia continue to be the heartland and cradle of traditional Malay culture. The Kelantanese concept of angin, or the inner winds, which is crucial to the understanding of such forms. The term Wayang Kulit is literally translated to mean leather theater, wayang being theater, and kulit to mean leather. There are essentially two reasons why the Wayang Kulit is performed. The first is for entertainment purposes, which is why before the advent of film and television, the wayang would enrapture villagers for nights on end. The second reason being for spiritual or healing purposes. This is where the Kelantanese concept of angin comes in once again. It is believed that human beings are controlled by two agents, the introvert and the extrovert impulse. And if either is in imbalance, sickness ensues and human beings are incapable of leading full lives. According to the Kelantanese, the dislocation of balance is one of the major causes of illnesses, and a restoration of balance through ritual performance serves to be a healing process. This is why the Tok Dalang, or puppet master, is revered for not just being a master storyteller, but as a shaman or healer as well. And there are times when he himself needs to serve his own personal imbalances. There are 4 kinds of Wayang Kulit in Malaysia, but the most performed and intriguing style is performed in Kelantan. It is called the Wayang Kulit Siam, or Siamese shadow puppet play. It is also active in the Patani region of South Thailand, where it is culturally contiguous with Kelantan. The language that is spoken during a performance is that of Kelantanese Patani Malay. Wayang Kulit Siam puppets are intricately carved and vibrantly painted 2-dimensional figures that are made from goat hide or in the past, buffalo hide. They comprise a vast array of characters which include the hero, heroine, warrior, clown, ogre, or magician. The repertoire is based on Malay and literary versions of the ancient Hindu epic, the Ramayana, or the Hikayat Maharajawana, which tell of the adventures of Sri Rama and his consort, Siti Dewi. The physical requirements of the Wayang Kulit entail a space called a panggung, or stage, which is built every time a performance is staged. A basic set of puppets consists of 60 figures and range in size and colors depending on the type and rank of the character. The most important puppet, which opens and ends each performance, is that of the Pohon Biringin, or banyan tree, the symbol of eternal life. The musical ensemble consists of a group of live musicians who play a variety of drums, brass gongs, cymbals, and an oboe called a serunai. This gamelan orchestra is indigenous and crucial to many traditional forms in all regions of Southeast Asia. The Wayang Kulit is seen as a microcosm of the workings of the universe. The central post in the panggung, or the stage, symbolizes the axis mundi, which passes through the 3 worlds, the sky, the earth, and the netherworld. And the puppets become active participants in the battle between good and evil. Ritual performances of the Wayang Kulit are held periodically when a Tok Dalang or puppet master feels the need to fulfill a vow, a salutation to his teachers and their lineage, graduation ceremonies or cleansing ceremonies which may entail an individual or an entire village. On such occasions, theatre becomes transformed into ritual and into an essentially community-based activity, or selamatan. The distinction between performers and audience is blurred and broken down. The spirit world is present to gain in a 2-way transaction. Ritual performances often include the sacrifice of an animal, usually a chicken, as the presence of blood in this situation invites the most distinguished of all guests, a supernatural or a spirit audience. A Tok Dalang is trained from a very young age to learn epic stories, songs, and invocations by oral tradition. He will then learn to manipulate his puppets, sometimes 10 or more at a time, and give them individual voices and characteristics, and tell stories of great heroes, evil ogres, and maidens in distress. He will also learn to combine new and old stories and include modern situations in his storytelling. If he can do all this and more, this will make him a master puppeteer. At this very moment, there is only one such person left in Malaysia, the legendary Dalang Dolah Baju Merah, or Dolah of the red shirt. I first saw him perform in the early 90s and was transfixed by his voice and his passion, and decided a few years ago to conceptualize, write, narrate, and photograph a documentary series on traditional Malaysian theatre. The work that you will see is a result of some of these efforts. I'd like to show you some slides now of various aspects of the Wayang Kulit. This is the Pohon Beringin, or the banyan tree, the symbol of eternal life. Each Wayang Kulit performance always begins with this puppet. This is a puppet of an ogre. And the puppet on the left is the hero, Sri Rama. This is an unpainted puppet of Laksamana, the brother of Sri Rama. These are how the puppets are stacked up behind the screen. What is at the bottom is a banana trunk, and the puppets are stuck into the trunk so that the puppet master can easily pick them and manipulate them during a performance. That's a very, very evil ogre, that one. That's another one. This is a character called Pak Dogol, who is like a clown or a jester in the Wayang Kulit. This particular puppet is almost 200 years old. And some of the puppets are stacked up. These are modern puppets, by the way. It's not very clear, but some of them are put up on string. There are also puppets of animals, as you can see. And this is the great puppet master, Dalang Dolah Baju Merah. This is him preparing for a performance. This is a pangong, or a stage. In the village, a lot of the time, a pangong is built very, very specifically for a performance. This is the Tiang Siti Dewi, which will enable the heroine of this particular tale to ascend into heaven. And these are sort of ritualistic animal sacrifices that are made out of flour and water to represent a whole spectrum of animal life. That's a bit dark, but those are a collection of drums. And those are one of the small sort of gamelan instruments. That's another one. And these are some of the next few slides are some of Pak Dolah's musicians who play with him every time he performs. And they all wear red shirts. That's the name of the troupe. This is pretty much a scene, what it normally looks like behind the screen of a Wayang Kulit performance. And we end with the Pohon Beringin. Right, I'd like to show now the last 10 minutes of a half-an-hour documentary, which is very, very specifically about Dalang Dolah Baju Merah, and it's the sort of the third night of a highly ritualistic performance that he did to salute his spirit teachers. So can we have the documentary, please? palace of Sita Dewi, which has 40 legs. The bamboo flagpoles are called Chandi Sarirama and have to be attractively adorned with coconut fronds and flowers. A chicken is sacrificed. Its blood will attract spirits to the ritual. Figurines are made of rice flour and water to represent the different worlds or different levels of consciousness. A downpour threatens to dampen the spirit of all involved. The villagers stay away from the rain. It does not matter, as tonight the primary audience is an invisible one, a spirit audience. Pak Dolah is in good form. It is important that a dalang is allowed to perform the berjamu. The time has come for him to appease the spirits that have given him his power for over 50 years. Tonight will be a test of his faith and his endurance. Earlier, Sri Rama had ordered the death of his wife, but he now regrets his decision. Laksamana, his brother, reveals that he could not bring himself to kill her. Rama pursues Sita in an attempt to rekindle their love. Thus begins a chase that transcends worlds. Transformation ensues in the form of beasts, birds, fish, as this heavenly chase gains more and more momentum. Rama makes efforts to organize a conciliatory ritual to win his wife back. At this point, the two stories parallel each other. Both Sri Rama and Pak Dolah are performing the berjamu for separate reasons, but with the same intent, that of appeasing the shadow spirits. This becomes the premise of the berjamu ceremony. Evil spirits are also invited to the feast. The most malefic one invoked is the ogre, Sang Kaki Bentara Kala. The Pangong has now become the netherworld, where humans and shadow spirits converge in a mystical battle of good and evil. At dawn, the screen or kale is rolled up. This is a symbolic extension of the ritual and performance area. This is the moment of truth for any dalang. Now, Pak Dolah has to prove his worth in the spirit world. He takes on the persona of Huat Lim and goes forth to invite gods, spirits and demons to the feast. He goes into a deep trance while taking on the identity of the puppet. As the trance is intense, an assistant restrains him from behind. The feast is literal as he plunges into the balai again and again. It serves to satisfy the tacit demands of the spirits by providing them with food offerings. He has to be restrained as they continue in their invisible fill. A Malay shaman is present who makes sure that Pak Dolah comes out of his trance. As this state is very hypnotic, members of the audience are also very vulnerable. Suddenly, an old man in the audience goes into a trance. He is encouraged to release his emotions. Once the spirits have eaten their fill, the offerings are taken away. The spirits are released back into the ether. Pak Dolah has performed and fated his spirit guardians. By choosing to live in Kelantan, he has remained sincere to his origins. For the sake of his integrity as a dalang, he has chosen to live amongst the unbelievers.
If Wayang Kulit is disallowed, then there's no hope for me. My puppets will go to waste. I'll perform whenever I can. I'm already getting old. It's just that after I die, I won't have anyone to replace me.
If only there was a brighter future for Pak Dola. With his failing health and performance restrictions, one can only hope. Hope for a future when the shadow spirits will once again rise and do battle in the sacred realm between the earth and the sky. Thank you. I have some shadow puppets here, if some of you might like to have a look later on. There's this one. Please feel free to come and have a look later on. These are not Wayang Kulit Siam, as they are actually quite rare, and it's not proper for one to separate puppets once they're part of a family. So these are the more commercial variety, which I managed to pick up. This is Wayang Kulit Purwa, which is traditionally played in the southern part of Peninsular Malaysia, so it's quite different. So feel free to come and have a look later on. Thanks. Thank you.
The next presentation is by Huat, who's a graduate, was here during the late 80s, went to work for Norman, and is now on his own. What do you want to present you with?
Thank you very much, Dr. Ken, and thank you, Mohsen, for the invitation. I mean, it's great to be back. It hasn't not much changed. The toilet's still where it is. Find my way around. Can I have the thing starting, please?